Hello everybody, and welcome to my channel. This is my first video on here, so please try to be kind. And yeah, let's just get right into this. So, Death Battle just finished its 7th season, and I do have to say, I liked a lot of the episodes this year. Wasn't as good as Season 6, but man, it was certainly a good season. And with Season 8 on the way, I think it's only fitting that I just give some matchups here. But first, of course, I want to go over a few rules I have for these. The first one, no obvious stomps. Each character has to at least have some degree chance to win, or at least has to have 1 or 2 advantages over the other character. 2. No Marvel or DC fights, or just any generic matches at all. I mean, there is so many of these that could be done, and I'm just trying to avoid them here, because, well, to be honest, when you come on here, you're not looking for that, and I just want to be more creative with that. 3. The characters have to be similar in more than 2 ways. What I mean by this is I just want to give them the best matchup possible, and no generic matches that really have nothing in common. 4. I have to be able to add something to this match, so if this has already been done before, or if I just do not know the characters, then I will not be doing it, and I will not be talking about them on here today. 5. No highly requested or confirmed matches. I do not want to make this video generic, so I'm going to be avoiding highly requested matches. 6. No more than 3 characters from the same universe on this video. This is an important one that I want to talk about, so I will not be featuring more than 3 characters from the same universe on here. More than likely, it'll be less than 2. But I can maybe make a follow-up video if there is a certain universe that people do want to see. And finally, 7. No rematches or characters who have already been on the show. This one is pretty self-explanatory. I want to see new characters, and I know many people do. So there is none of that gonna be happening here. But anyways, in no particular order, here's my list. So let's just talk about it right now. So for this segment, I'm actually gonna have to pick 2 battles, but that's actually gonna make sense once I explain why. Now, in fairy tales, folklore, legends, or even just fiction in general, it's almost common depiction that dragons are enormous beasts of destruction and chaos that just destroy everything in their path and are basically unstoppable. Which only makes sense why Godzilla's main enemy is a giant 3-headed dragon, almost like a Hydra. King Ghidorah is easily one of my favorite Godzilla enemies, and he is by far the most well known. So let's run the wheel, see who I want him to fight. King Ghidorah vs Deathwing. Now, I am well aware they did a Death Battle cast on this, but frankly, I do not care for this. Both King Ghidorah and Deathwing are huge dragons and enormous beasts of destruction, and when they are awakened, they cause chaos on a global scale. King Ghidorah is powerful enough to create hurricanes just by flying, and Deathwing is capable of creating earthquakes. But I really love Deathwing, and I absolutely adore King Ghidorah. I love both of them, so I would be happy with this match regardless of who won. I really want to see both of these characters so bad. Now, this one is actually quite tricky to pick a winner since King Ghidorah has a slight size advantage on Deathwing, and he is most likely stronger since he is able to overpower Godzilla sometimes. But Deathwing has an advantage in arsenal and, well, firepower, quite literally. King Ghidorah uses mainly electricity and wind-based attacks, while Deathwing uses fire and magical abilities. I wanna say King Ghidorah though, simply because of how powerful he is and how experienced he is going up against similar threats. But I see why most people would take opposed to this since, well, it's been done as a death battle cast and, well, you know, a lot of people want to see fresh results and all that. So, since I love Deathwing too, I'm gonna give him another chance and I'm gonna throw him in the wheel too. Let's see who I pick for Deathwing.
I'm overflowing with power. It feels like when I mastered the art of dragon slaying all those years ago. I was a king before, but I've become a god!
Deathwing vs. Achnalagia. Now, Achnalagia from Fairy Tail is a very powerful dragon and beast just to be reckoned with. Now, Deathwing and Achnalagia actually have a lot in common. Both are magical dragons with a lot of magical abilities somehow. They're sorcerers, which is kind of weird, but I actually really like this matchup. Now, both of them are at least capable of destroying an island, but I really don't know. Now, I am not super knowledgeable on Fairy Tail. Now, please take my words for a grain of salt. But with all this in mind, I believe Deathwing is going to pull a win here. Simply because he seems to have an edge in, well, firepower overall, and intelligence even. This one is honestly, it's up for debate which one you guys would choose. Personally, I really like King Ghidorah. I prefer King Ghidorah over Achnalagia out of personal bias. But this one, it's all up to you guys. I want you to choose. So the season premiere came out for Season 7, and I actually quite enjoyed it. However, there were a lot of people who were upset that Broly wasn't fighting Azura. However, Azura is just a little underpowered to go against Broly, and I do actually have a much better matchup for Azura here. So let's run the wheel and see who I think he should fight.
With blood and rage of crimson red, we fill men's souls with darkest dread, and twist your minds to pain and hate. We'll burn you all. That is your fate.
Azura vs. Atrocitus. Atrocitus is a very powerful enemy, but he is not nearly as powerful as the Green Lantern, so this isn't really a stomp, and both actually have an equal chance here. The connection is that both of them had their wife and child murdered by higher beings, then used that rage to fuel their attacks and went on a murderous rampage, killing essentially gods to get revenge on them. Atrocitus has quite similar powers to the Green Lantern, I'd say, but he's not nearly as powerful. Now, Atrocitus has a lot of versatility in his attacks, being a Red Lantern, of course, and he is definitely one of the more cool DC villains, but Azura has a lot of forms to combat this, and I'd say both could be scaled to universal. This is also a great match for the reason that there is actually a chance to end DC's win streak against non-Marvel characters. Now, this isn't the whole reason I put him against Azura, but at least there's a chance of Azura beating Atrocitus. And that actually brings me to my next point as to who I think would win. And looking at the numbers, I think this is an Ozra win. Ozra is a god killer. Ozra just has the raw power that Atrocitus seems to lack. But it's a good matchup nonetheless. Atrocitus vs Red Hulk, just thematically, it's just a bad match and I really don't like it. For the reason of, they don't really have anything in common outside of being, well, raging red people. But here, I actually think this could be a really creative and entertaining episode. Now, if I'm being completely honest with myself, I am a huge fan of the Mario franchise, and I actually really like a lot of the characters. Now, with the recent trailer for Bowser's Fury, Bowser Jr. is actually going to be one of the main characters, and I really like Bowser Jr. Bowser Jr. is easily one of my favorite characters in video games, probably, and I really want to see him. So let's run the wheel for Bowser Jr. here, and let's take a look at who I pick.
Zombie tech delivery tablet, I can perform all of the same functions from anywhere in the world. Plus, I love buttons.
Dr. Zomboss vs Bowser Jr. I am actually shocked that this battle wasn't suggested before. Both are technological geniuses who use their innovation and skill with machinery to run an army, essentially. Both of them are very versatile with their machines. They have mechs, submarines, lasers, all of that sort of thing, and I'm gonna go over it in more detail. Now, I know a lot of people are probably confused why is Dr. Zomboss, but Bowser Jr. really has a lot of hard matches. One I see a lot is Bowser Jr. vs Tron-Bonne, and I really do not like that fight, simply because Bowser Jr. just stomps her, and they don't really have much in common, other than they're just kids who wield mechs. And Bowser Jr. vs Metal Sonic, it's just another Mario vs Sonic debate, and they literally have nothing in common with each other. And Dr. Eggman is way too powerful for Dr. Zomboss or Jr. to realistically handle, so I think both of them are an equal match for each other, and I think both of them, this is easily their best match. Now, Dr. Zomboss has a lot of technology. He has massive mechs, he has flying machines, and lasers that are capable of denting the moon somehow. But Bowser Jr. obviously has his signature clown car, he has the Mega Hammer, which will become really useful. However, Dr. Zomboss actually does have a counter for the Mega Hammer. Bowser Jr. has tanks, submarines, warships. He has tons of tools at his disposal. But the most interesting thing that both Bowser Jr. and Dr. Zomboss have in common is that both of them are actually capable of creating life. Dr. Zomboss is capable of raising massive zombies out of the ground, and Bowser Jr. with his paintbrush is capable of creating sort of paint entities. Now, Bowser Jr. would far exceed him in physical status with the bodies, but that is hardly a factor here because this is mostly about machinery. Now, Dr. Zomboss, he built all of the imp mechs, and there's dragon mechs, there's shrimp mechs, so I'd say it's pretty reasonable that he could have it, since he actually does use machines like this all the time. As for who I think would actually win the fight, it is a very difficult winner to pick, honestly, because Dr. Zomboss's machines have a ridiculous amount of power behind them, but Junior's machines also have way more variety to them. He has submarines, tanks, cars, flying machines, clown cars, bombs, all of that. But from what I've seen, they can easily be destroyed, and Dr. Zomboss's machines seem to be more durable, with the exception of a few like the Mega Leg and Mega Hammer. But overall, I think that I'm gonna give this win to Junior, simply because he has more versatility with the machines and more variety, also has better environment control, and more combat experience overall, so I'm just gonna give this one to Junior. Now, we've all played games like Metal Gear where there's a focus on stealth, and then there's games like Halo where it's just brute force all the way. But Crysis is a game that really doesn't fit in with either of them. It's more or less a mixture of both. Now, Crysis is a sort of legacy game that most people love to play years later after its release. It was released years and years ago, yet it is still very popular to this day, and I definitely do see why. It is such an amazing game, and I really enjoy the gameplay. The main character of the series, it's kind of common acceptance that Prophet is the main character of the whole series. Prophet is definitely one tough combatant, so let's run the wheel, see who I pick for Prophet here.
The operation is being led by a Red known as Zaitsev. Oh yeah, this is Sam. DARPA sent him to come along with us.
Sam Gideon vs. Prophet. Now, the connection here is that both of these guys are super soldiers who are basically the top performers of their leagues and have many shared abilities in common. Now, this one is definitely a very interesting match, and I really do not see why it's not recommended more. Vanquish is another one of those legacy games that people would love to play years later after its release, sort of as a callback to when games had much more quality, sort of like people listening to older music. But both of these games are definitely similar in that regard, how you can play them years later and they never once dip in quality. But the two protagonists have lots in common here. Mainly, they both are super soldiers with insanely powerful suits that they use to their advantage here. Sam Gideon has a few advantages here. I hear that he is faster than Prophet and potentially stronger depending on how you scale certain feats. But Prophet definitely does have the more varied abilities. He can turn invisible, strength mode, can greatly enhance his strength. He has tons of weapons at his disposal, but so does Sam Gideon, so this one is a very interesting match here. Now, this one is really difficult to pick a winner here, but I'm gonna have to choose Prophet simply because he seems much more capable in a battle. I mean, both are extremely capable fighters, but Prophet just has the variety of techniques that Sam Gideon probably hasn't seen before. Although Sam Gideon definitely does have the experience fighting more powerful enemies and definitely has more experience in terms of more destructive battles, but I think the variety of abilities that Prophet has here are just gonna overshadow Sam Gideon completely and give him a win. But regardless, I really love both these characters, and I think regardless, this would be a very interesting match. Sam Gideon definitely deserves a death battle. The only other person I could think of was Jetstream Sam. Jetstream Sam doesn't really have much in common outside of just super soldiers who look similar and are named Sam. I think this one would be much more entertaining to watch regardless, so I'm just gonna stick with this one. But regardless, this would be an amazing match, as both series deserve the representation, and I'd love to see both of them in Death Battle. Now, the Kung Fu Panda franchise is nothing short of astonishing. All the movies have been consistently great, the extended canon has remained interesting and kept people's attention, and overall it's a very energetic and fun series. However, if there is one area that really shines, it is definitely the villains of the series. There's Kai, the evil Lord Shen, but all of them will always be eclipsed by Tai Lung in my opinion. Tai Lung is honestly one of the most intimidating animated villains I've ever seen, and he is definitely my favorite by far. Tai Lung has so much potential for a death battle, so let's put him in the ring and see who I pick for him.
That's right! Yeah!
Tai Lung vs. Incineroar. Two martial artist cats with pyrotechnic powers are gonna go head to head. Now, Incineroar is a wrestler mainly, but he is a martial artist, and he seems to be in a pretty even caliber with Tai Lung, so I say it's pretty even. Incineroar, you can definitely pull from his smash move set for this battle because it seems pretty acceptable in that regard, but of course no scaling. Incineroar and Tai Lung both have some sort of pyrokinesis to some extent. They both can channel fire and use it in combat, which I think is actually pretty cool. Now, this one I really like for a few reasons, because Incineroar is definitely one of the more cool Smash characters, and Tai Lung, how can you not love Tai Lung? He is by far my favorite animated villain of all time, and he definitely deserves to be in Death Battle. I would actually have to go with Tai Lung on this. Incineroar has some very high caliber attack. As you can see from the Smash trailers, he is certainly a very powerful opponent, but Tai Lung definitely outclasses him in combat experience and skill. Top it off with a variety of very useful techniques such as paralysis, nerve attacks, speed. Tai Lung seems to have speed on his side too, as he is able to keep up with Shifu and even defeat the entire Furious 5 by himself. Although Incineroar is very fast and definitely has a lot of firepower on Tai Lung, I think in the end Tai Lung's intelligence, skill, speed, and experience is gonna win out in the end. But overall, I love both these characters, and I would be hyped to see them too. And I would be hyped to see both of them go at it in Death Battle. Now, I'm a big fan of the Assassin's Creed games, and there are certainly lots of characters to choose from. A lot of the protagonists are definitely very memorable characters, with fan favorites. There's Ezio, Edward, but personally, I'd say that my favorite protagonist, it's very controversial, but I really like Arno Dorian. Arno Dorian just has a lot of charisma to him, and he has a very tragic backstory and story in general. Overall, I really like Arno, so let's run the wheel, see who I pick for Arno here.
My dear Corvo, what a sad hand fate has dealt you. The beloved Empress dead, and everyone thinks you're the killer. But we know what really happened, don't we? You don't want to end your life to the sound of idiots cheering as your head hits the muck, do you? Let's see if we can do better.
Corvo Attano vs. Arno Dorian, two of Europe's deadliest assassins clash to the death. The connection here is that both of them had their fathers murdered at a young age, and had some sort of relative murdered, then they were framed for it and went on their journey to try and clear their name from it. Both of them trained at a very young age, so I'd say that both of them are pretty even in experience, but I just want to talk about this one because this one really hasn't been recommended, and I really want this one to happen. Now, a lot of people may think that, oh, isn't this a huge stomp for Corvo Attano since he can teleport, he can do all sorts of things, I think even mind control and possession. This isn't a stomp, for one reason that people forget Arno also has the Sword of Eden. The Sword of Eden can also teleport, and it protects him from mental attacks, and to some degree can even mind control people themselves. Now, Corvo Attano's Dark Vision versus the Eagle Vision, it's pretty comparable in terms of stats, I'd suppose, because the Eagle Vision, it's kind of like Daredevil's senses, where you can sort of focus in on what's around you rather than literally seeing through things. This one is pretty tricky, because like, Arno definitely has better mobility and has more variety of weapons and tools here, but Corvo Attano definitely outclasses him in raw strength and even, well, arsenal, because I believe he can freeze time in some instances, but it's not an infinitely lasting thing, so it does run out. But I think the Arno and the Sword of Eden definitely do have a chance here, because the Sword of Eden is extremely powerful. It can unleash like concussive blasts, it can blast you with lightning. It all depends if Corvo Attano can dodge it and all that, or if he can handle the Sword of Eden. I personally prefer Assassin's Creed over Dishonored, but Dishonored is a very good franchise, and I think Dishonored deserves to be in Death Battle just as much as Assassin's Creed. So this matchup is one of my favorites, and it's a good one. But overall, I think that Corvo Attano is going to win, although the Sword of Eden is definitely very powerful. And even though I'd rather have Arno win, Corvo Attano is just insane in some instances, so I'm just going to give him a win. Not a stomp, slight edge, but I'm going to give him a win here. And I'm okay with him winning, because he is honestly a very cool character. Now, this is crazy for me to believe, but we have had 7 full seasons, and there has barely been any representation for any of the fantasy or mystical genres, with the closest being Harry Potter, and that was one match. Now, I think it is crazy that the Lord of the Rings hasn't at all been explored. Now, the very popular match up here is Gandalf vs. Dumbledore, but personally, that's just a little way over requested, and I mean, there's nothing really I can add to it still, because since it's been covered so many times, and that's not really what I'm going to be about here. Easily one of my favorite villains, and one of the most intimidating villains in possibly all of movie history, is Sauron. Sauron is extremely powerful in the movie. And not to mention, if we scale him to what he is actually capable of in the books, which is something that should be done, then he gets even more ridiculously powerful. And there is certainly a lot of source material to go off of based on Sauron, so let's just run the wheel and see who I think you should fight.
And I know You will show restraint when exercising your great power. I tell you this, for when my days have come to an end, you shall be king.
The Lich King vs. Sauron. The Lich King is easily one of the most famous and favorite antagonists of the Warcraft series, and he is definitely a powerful opponent. Both Sauron and the Lich King command an army of undead warriors, both have a similar attire, and both are seemingly defeated threats who came back. They both are extremely powerful magic users and can do some pretty incredible things, and it's almost ridiculous to scale their powers. The Lich King obviously has some really cool ice attacks, while Sauron is mainly based on fire. Of course, Sauron here will be getting a ring, and if Thanos gets the Infinity Gauntlet, I see no reason why Sauron shouldn't get the ring since it is most closely associated to him. Well, I guess Gollum, but really, what does that even matter? This one is really difficult to pick a winner here since both are extremely powerful and both have been shown to do some really incredible things in their universes. For a winner here, I may be a little bit biased, but I'm gonna go with Sauron. If you give him the ring, it is pretty much over for the Lich King. But of course, he does stand a pretty high chance scaling him to other characters in Warcraft, and what we see him do in all the trailers, snapshots, and in-game, this one is definitely one of my favorite matchups, and I think this one really needs to be done. So I'm pretty sure all of us have heard of Overwatch at least once, right? Regardless if we play it or not, we've definitely heard of it. And Overwatch has a huge roster of characters to choose from, and honestly there's a lot of really good options here for a death bout. But personally, my favorite is Soldier 76. Soldier 76 is one of the best written characters, and to me he's just one of the more interesting ones. Gameplay aside, he's definitely my favorite. So let's run the wheel here and see who I pick for Soldier 76.
If you're a captain and I'm a Jedi, then technically I outrank you, right?
In my book, experience outranks everything. Nice shot. The name's Rex. But you'll call me Captain or Sir.
Soldier 76 vs. Captain Rex. Now, I am a huge fan of the Star Wars series, and I love Captain Rex. Captain Rex is the fan-favorite clone trooper all around, and he's just a great character overall. The connection here is that both of them were very high-ranking soldiers and leaders of their own squads, until there was a falling out with governments that forced them to go underground for a while, secretly fighting until they were older. Now, this one is definitely one of my favorite matchups on this list because I think it is by far the best match for both of them. I've seen Male Reddick for Captain Rex, but I don't really like that one as much because they don't really have much in common outside of being high-ranking soldiers. Personally, for Male Reddick, I would choose someone more like Crossbones, but even if that is a stomp, there's better matches for him anyways, but this one by far my favorite match for both of them. Now, this one is pretty tricky for a winner here. This one is definitely debatable. Captain Rex by far has the better armor. This is without question, because his armor is built to withstand blasters and all of the sort. But Soldier 76 also has lots of shields that he can use, but I guess they do not last nearly as long as body armor. He also has rifles, explosives, all of that. Captain Rex has his 2 blasters. And I'd say that this is a really even match. But also, you have to remember, Captain Rex fought in the Clone Wars, and he definitely has the experience there over Soldier 76. The Clone Wars were some of the worst wars in Star Wars history, and if you look at him, he is surely one of the best fighters in the whole series. He is easily the best clone soldier, and he is by far my favorite. So, overall, running the numbers, while Soldier 76 probably has the better weaponry, I think that Captain Rex's armor and experience is going to give him a win here. But overall, I love this match. I'm sure most people are familiar with One Punch Man. The villains in the series are usually pretty good, and by far my favorite is the Deep Sea King, because he has a really cool design, and he's kind of entertaining just to see on screen all the time. So let's put him under the wheel and see if we can get One Punch Man a win. The Deep Sea King vs. King Shark. 2 Kings of the Deep Sea villains from their own respective universes who commonly challenge the main heroes, who are often seen in yellow and orange, and both of them are just brutes of just pure muscle and power. Now, this one is an interesting one to me because it's kind of tricky. With King Shark, there really isn't many speed feats on his side. The only one I could think of is somewhat being able to handle the Flash, but not really at the same time, because it's a different Flash that he fights, not the ridiculously OP one. And the Deep Sea King seems to have much more speed feats, but then again, King Shark also scales to Aquaman, who seems to be way more powerful than anything we've seen in One Punch Man, aside from Saitama himself, who was the one to kill the Deep Sea King. The Deep Sea King has a hydrated form and an unhydrated form. Both are coming into play in the battle. Using the stats for hydrated form, it's pretty weird because hydrated Deep Sea King is bigger than King Shark, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's stronger. It is pretty iffy on King Shark's feats. I don't know enough about them, and I haven't seen enough, but from what I've seen, this is a pretty fair match. But with all my information, I am just gonna have to hand this one to the King Shark for scaling to people like Aquaman and Gorilla Grodd and the Flash. He just seems to have so much experience in that area that it seems like a loss once again for One Punch Man, but that is okay because I really like this match and it's one I'd like to see on the show. So let's move on to our number 1 pick. But before I get to number 1, guys, I have a few honorable mentions that were really good, but just unfortunately couldn't get on the list. When I was picking Acnologia, there was another opponent I had in mind. Bahamut from Final Fantasy vs. Acnologia was definitely my second pick over Deathwing. I know a lot of people love Final Fantasy, but personally, I would rather see Warcraft, but this matchup is out there if you guys want to cover it. My second Dragon match that nearly got on but was beaten out by King Ghidorah versus Deathwing, and Deathwing versus Acnology. It was just barely beaten out. Smaug from Lord of the Rings versus Vitalis from Monster Hunter. This one is definitely one of my favorite dragon battles, but it was just another dragon battle, and I didn't like it as much because, well, frankly, I like the other characters more, so I just went with the other ones over this one, and I'm okay with that option. Fatalis pretty handedly wins this one, in my opinion, but it's up for debate, really. I can talk about it later, but not for today. Lastly, my other pick for a dragon fight was Toru from Dragon Maid vs. Wendy from Fairy Tail, but this one is pretty basic. It's just dragon girls, but like at the same time, I'm pretty sure people would have rather seen Acnologia, so I went with him instead, and personally I like him better and I actually know stuff about him. This one I really have no idea, but if anyone does know, they can tell me in the comments below. I'll listen. Steppenwolf vs. Starscream was easily one of my favorite ones on here, and I was so close to talking about it. The connection here is that both of them are very high-ranking warlords and kind of conquerors of worlds for superior beings. Steppenwolf, he serves Darkseid, and Starscream, obviously, he serves Megatron. Both of them commonly fail and are kind of pathetic, but this one is handedly a Starscream win, and that's definitely a good one. I didn't choose this one because, well, I said no reoccurring characters, and I have to stick to that rule, but if there wasn't that rule in place, I would have easily picked this one. Gaegeo vs. Colossus is pretty simple on paper. It's just metal people with metal-based powers. If you ask me, this one is solidly a win for Colossus. In Fairy Tail, he's pretty powerful, but Colossus his durability is kind of broken, so I'm gonna go with him on this one. But it, once again, was a fight I really liked, but just barely missed the mark on my list. Rodan vs. Rathalos, two massive firebirds in King of the Skies. I already had King Ghidorah on this list, and I'd rather see King Ghidorah than Rodan, but as you can tell, I am a big kaiju fan. I didn't want to overrun this list with kaijus because I think that's not fair to other people who don't really like kaijus. Ironically enough, this is another Monster Hunter battle. Fatalis and Rathalos both got on the honorable mentions, but didn't actually get into the video themselves, which is pretty ironic, but this one I can talk about in the future. Now, another kaiju battle that I really had in mind was Zeton vs. Gigan, two cyborg kaijus and legendary opponents. This one I really love, and I came up with it. And honestly, we haven't seen any Ultraman characters on Death Battle, so I think this one would be pretty cool to see. Zeton pretty handedly wins over Gigan, but it's definitely an interesting one I like. But once again, I didn't want to shove this list full of kaijus despite my bias towards them. And speaking of Ultraman, Ultraman vs. EVA 1. This one is one that I really haven't seen suggested at all, and it seems like a really obvious match. Two robotic heroes of the world, and basically alien killers. People have picked Gypsy Danger over Ultraman for this one, and I really fail to see why, because this one is much more fair. I would have to say Ultraman is gonna lose to EVA 1. In my opinion, it's a really, really close fight. And lastly, for my honorable mentions, Dr. Paradigm vs. the Lizard. I love this match so much, and I would have loved to see it. I suggested this one on a few forums, but unfortunately, the reason it got on this list, despite it having great thematic connections, it's a fair fight, it's got everything, but unfortunately, it seems like not enough people care about Dr. Paradigm to actually see this match, and that kind of makes me sad that I can't talk about it. I might talk about it in the future if there's more support and hype for this match. The Lizard wins, but in a very close fight. It's sad that I can't really see this, but it's alright. And that concludes my honorable mentions, so let's get on with number 1, shall we? Alright, so coming in at the number 1 spot, it's easily the most obvious match on this list. How could it get any more obvious? You got Dasani Water Bottle versus Nestle. No rivalry even comes close to this match. Now this one is pretty interesting because Dasani, their bottles are definitely more durable, but then the Nestle bottles. I'm just kidding. That's not the real battle. Is Pepsi Man versus Coca-Cola Bear? See, this one is actually a very interesting debate because Pepsi Man is fueled by Pepsi, but does the Coca-Cola Bear's infinite supply of Coke, does it fuel the Pepsi Man, or does it weaken him? We don't know. I'm just kidding. That's not the number 1 spot either. My favorite death battle on this list is, wait for it, Funky Kong from Donkey Kong vs. Edamon from Digimon. Two cool guy showman monkeys whose main obsessions have nothing to do with their adventures and are set in hobbies. Both of them are mainly self-absorbed and are only concerned with their personal hobbies rather than a goal that benefits others, and usually never take anything seriously. Both are highly intelligent technology users, both love music, both love to wear shades, and you could also say that both have a metal form. That's a lot of connections now, isn't it? To say I am shocked that I'm the first person I have seen to have mentioned this battle is a massive shock to me. You have a visual similarity on top of similar personalities and similar interests. In fact, it is so bizarre how these two very popular and well-known characters have almost zero death battle recommendations. On paper, this is a good matchup, and in execution, I believe this episode would be amazing. The only thing separating these two is that Edamon is a villain, and Funky Kong is kind of a hero. Kind of. He doesn't really do much in terms of being a hero, but he's kind of a hero. But that just makes it better when looking at amazing episodes like Iron Man vs. Lex Luthor, Hulk vs. Doomsday, Dragonzord vs. Mechagodzilla, and so on. And this match is no stomp by any means. Let me explain to you why this match is possibly the greatest untapped death battle in history. That may be an exaggeration, but this is my favorite death battle that I've ever came up with. Funky Kong and Edamon both have various abilities and power-ups that counter each other near blow for blow, with Edamon having energy projection and mind-controlling abilities, but it's unknown if this would even work on Funky Kong, since Donkey Kong was immune to mind control, and it's implied Diddy was too, since none of it worked on him either. For this match, I'm just gonna be going off the face value feats like the speed, strength, and durability, because I really do not feel qualified picking a winner on my own just yet. So I'm gonna start with Funky Kong since he is the first person in the matchup, so let's get on with it. So he is implied to have similar strength to Donkey Kong, but I will try to do my own calculations for this one. So after defeating a boss in Tropical Freeze, you can do this to them. Yeah, I know, it's ridiculous, right? Now for measuring this feat, I'm going to be using the World 4 boss, or the Pufferfish, since it's both one of the largest bosses and it is one of the easiest to measure since, well, it's a perfect sphere. Using this frame right here on my desktop, I was able to determine that this boss right here is 10.7 centimeters in diameter, while Funky Kong is 2.8 centimeters from head to feet. Using the official height for Donkey Kong as 238 centimeters, we know this pufferfish is 912.4 centimeters in diameter, or my American viewers, nearly 30 feet in diameter. Using the average size of a pufferfish as 25 centimeters and the weight of 30 pounds, this pufferfish is about 400 million cubic centimeters, or about 400 cubic meters, making it about 48,000 times more massive than our average pufferfish, or 1,459,438 pounds. Now that is heavy, but we haven't even done the calculations for punching that thing yet. Now the distance it takes for something to disappear from sight is about 3 miles, or 4.8 kilometers. After Funky Kong punches him, it takes about 4 seconds for the boss to disappear from sight, giving us an acceleration of 600 meters per second squared. Meaning that this feat right here, with the weight of the pufferfish and the acceleration, this means that Funky Kong is punching this thing with nearly 400 million newtons of force, or 90 million pounds. But this is nowhere near his limit. Funky Kong can briefly match Donkey Kong in strength and is even implied to surpass him. Donkey Kong was strong enough to punch the moon down from orbit, which equates to 3,346 megatons of force. Funky Kong is actually much stronger than this. Using stat cards from various games, we know that Funky Kong is slightly stronger than Donkey Kong, meaning that his max striking strength comes out to 4,461 megatons. Let's move on to speed. Funky Kong can easily land 24 hits in the time span of 3 seconds on the bosses. But how fast are those punches? Funky Kong is pretty comparable to Donkey Kong in terms of speed, and Donkey Kong is fast enough to ignite hydrogen in the air. At ground level, this would mean that he is punching at 3,800 miles per hour. Now, let's move on to durability. Scaling to Donkey Kong once again, Funky Kong is capable of surviving an explosion launching him into orbit and surviving orbital re-entry. But using Isaac Newton's laws of motion, the force needed to punch the moon down is also being exerted on his hand. And since Donkey Kong is noticeably hurt by this feat, it's a good starting point. Assuming we double the force, since this was with one hand that he did this feat, and he can be killed by K. Rool with consistent hits, also accounting for Funky Kong and his added hearts, we get a force of about 22,000 megatons. Holy hell, is that a lot. But now it's time we cover Edamon, so let's move on to Edamon. Edamon could match War Greymon, who is strong enough to knock back Venomaiostismon, who is the size of a skyscraper, which equates to a feat well over 20,000 tons, and is able to destroy Egyptian-sized pyramids. Using the Pyramid of Giza for reference, it comes in at a weight of 6.5 million tons. Destroying this much rock comes down to a force about 1,800 kilotons of force. He can also punch harder than people capable of cratering the sides of a mountain, which comes down to about 3.345 times 10 to the 18 joules of energy, or about 799.4 megatons of energy at a low ball. For speed, Etemon is actually able to catch missiles at Mach 5. He's also able to be shown to be way faster than Digimon, who move so fast that everything around them becomes a massive blur, and is way faster than Digimon, who also matched his Mach 5 feet. Scaling to other Digimon, this means Etemon well reaches 9,000 miles per hour. Etemon is durable enough to survive mountain-destroying attacks, and can take hits from people capable of destroying entire land masses. Using a few sources I found on the internet, and a few calculations myself, this comes out to roughly 21,000 megatons of TNT. Really impressive. So I just want to go through my calculations for power output. Without factoring in power-ups and Arsenal, their stats are really close. In their base forms, Funky Kong is slightly stronger than Etemon, and has the advantage in raw striking power. However, Etemon is much faster and is shown to have better reactionary feats. But durability is near dead even. That wasn't even planned. Now I could go on about stuff like Funky Kong's potions, surfboard, and gadgets, or Etemon's powers, abilities, and evolutions, but that would become too hard to debate for me and I'd be here way too long. Etemon has combat experience over Funky Kong since Funky Kong rarely gets into the action himself, but Funky Kong seems to have the edge in intelligence after looking at his various inventions. But my point being that this becomes a very interesting debate, which is why I am shocked I haven't seen this brought up before. You've got the perfect recipe for a great death battle episode. A thematic connection that is very obvious and easy to understand. Similar stats. Very entertaining and well-liked characters. And like I mentioned, a very interesting and difficult debate to discuss. And it is easily the best matchup that I personally was capable of coming up with. And that is why on my list, it has earned the spot of the #1 roster on my list. But hey everybody, please stick around because the fun isn't over yet. While my matchups are done, it's time for you guys to decide. I do something called a community matchup where I take a character and then in the comments you tell me exactly who you think would be a good matchup for him and how exactly you think the fight would go. So let's run the wheel here, see who I pick for today's community matchup. Now, I think that all kids can agree on a simple fact that dinosaurs are awesome, and the Devil Dinosaur from Marvel Comics certainly is no exception to that. The Devil Dinosaur is almost exactly what you'd think it is. It's sort of like a dinosaur infused with like the power of a volcano, and he is definitely a really cool dinosaur. He's a big red giant who can sometimes even overpower the Hulk. And that is insane. He has fought in Godzilla before. He has fought in all sorts of people. He stands about 40 feet tall in most incarnations, and he is a tank. He doesn't have any outside abilities like fire and all that. He's just sort of like a really strong dinosaur, but he's also a very intelligent dinosaur too. He has intelligence comparable to a normal human, which is pretty interesting. And I think that he is overall a very cool character. So I want you guys to go in the comments and let me know who you think he should fight. And the best answer, or the one I like the most, I will shout you out and make a thumbnail for that battle. So what are you all waiting for? Go to the comments below and start recommending some matches for this guy. I have to thank you all for watching, and I'm going to be uploading more. Just please subscribe to my channel because I will be uploading a lot of good videos. If you want a part 2 to this, I can do that because there's a lot of matchups I can still talk about. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of source material. I do this I'm doing this maybe once a week, I think. That's a good schedule. Anyways, leave a like, subscribe, join my channel, and I'll see you all next time.